So tell me a little bit about a number of things. I mean, what kind of time do you have? I'm free.
Oh, I got as much time as we need. I cleared my schedule for this just to make sure we can just, have an organic conversation and talk about, whatever, like wherever the conversation goes, I'm willing to talk about.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
but before we get started, I just, for project purposes, I just need your consent, that you're okay with me, recording, uh,
Sure.
this interview. So,
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
okay, cool.
And same on my end. Let me just record it as well. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so we for the project, they gave us some questions to ask. Um and they're like appreciative questions, they stated, for me. So I'll answer those to get those out the way, but I know that you gave me just ask questions at my leisure, and you're willing to talk about just about anything that pertains to your experience here at Gordon.
Hmm.
Is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So we'll just start. And I will say, like the moment that I got your name, I looked everywhere. Like I cross-referenced. I tried to find anything that I could to bring to the conversation, and I really couldn't find anything.
Hmm.
I went on Facebook. I asked Mr. Trailer. I'm asking everyone. I went through every article that they had at Gordon. I went through yearbooks, and I couldn't find anything. So we can kind of like start from the beginning. You can just like, who is Mr. Joe Davis?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I was born in Barnesville in 1955. So I was born into segregation.
Right.
Right. And of course, as you know, in Barnesville, the tracks run east and west.
Yes, sir.
And the northern part of the city is the African American side, and the southern part of the city is downtown, immediately after below the tracks. And they say it's going west toward Thomaston, but right there, I think the track is running east and west. But anyway, I grew up on that side of town, just a few blocks from downtown. Right now, where the police station sits on one side of the tracks, from across from the depot, there's the cemetery monument sales place. Behind the monument sales place, there's a police precinct, right? Well, that little area in there, I spent a lot of my childhood in that area where those little kind of duplex apartments are. They're like, 3-room houses each. I grew up in that little area. Another part of my family was down on Washington Street. So, which is just right down Railroad Street, a few blocks. I'm the fifth child of 5 in my family. We were a blended family. My mother had 2 children when she met my father, and although I'm the 5th child, we're all 2 years apart, and my mother was 23 years old when I was born.
Wow.
So do some math on that. And very typical in your typical, poor African American families, babies come early, but I was the last child out of 5, and my mother was 23. I went to Gordon. I started the grammar school in 1966.
Okay.
I was, as a matter of fact, the year before that, they sent out these little, it was a blue or green little 3x5 card in the mail. And this goes all the way back to Brown versus the Board of Education, right?
Yes, sir.
Separate but equal, separate was not equal. So the Supreme Court said, Georgia, separate is not equal. You're going to have to do something. And our Board of Education A lot of times when I talk about my journey, I use an analogy with Dorothy following the yellow brick road on the Wizard of Oz, right? When she gets to Oz, behind the curtain is, the wizard. So the wizard who was behind the curtain in Georgia, in Barnesville, was, of course, afraid, in my view, looking back 50 something years, almost 60 years now, in my view, was afraid of the mingling of the races and, of course, keeping white girls from black boys. I think that was a total driving force. So long story short, the first choice was by the wizard behind the curtain, who was the Board of Education, was let us allow people to choose where they wanted their children to go to school. Well, we know what that's going to mean. People rarely opt outside of that comfort zone, right? They rarely opt to operate outside the comfort zone. So of course, the majority of the black people sent their kids to the black school, and the majority of the white people, all the white people, sent their kids to the white school. My father said to my brother and me, it may not help right now, but you are going to go to the white school. He said that he believed that if there was ever going to be a fair chance for a black man or a black person in America, if you could get the same education as the white American gets, if the playing field was level, you should be able to go equally as far. And that was his philosophy. And he says, you going to Gordon. There's never an opportunity for a black person to go to a white school in this town. My children are going. So he sent my brother and me. My brother was 2 years older than me. I was 6th grade. He was 8th grade. And, I think from my observation, of course, with the luxury of hindsight, it appears that the older children were more negatively impacted than the younger children. One of the things about, the younger we were, I guess the less hatred that was ingrained in my counterparts, So I think I probably received a better welcome than he did. Also, I was just 11 years old, 10 years old at the time, something like that, 10 or 11, and he was 12 or 13. And it was a different, different scenario because, but anyway, still, we went to, we integrated the school system. I think I was in the first big wave. That were the year before, some high school kids went to the high school, but the next year, a larger group, and I was in that group. I think the first group went in 1965. I went in 1966, but the first group throughout the entire school system may have had 2 or 3 kids.
So when integrating into Gordon, could you fully understand what was happening at the time due to integration and racism? Could you fathom that at that age?
No. I do know, I recall, and I was in 6th grade. I remember a little kid coming up to me, probably a 1st or 2nd grader, and he looks up at me and he says, "Are you a nigger?" So, that were those other things like in the hallways, you would hear somebody say, "That's a nigger." I'll never forget this one. My first day in the lunch line, I walk in and I inadvertently touched one of my classmates. The classmate looked at me with this look and touched his buddy and said, "You got the cooties." And then they passed the cooties down the line. So although I didn't quite understand racism, one of the things my father made me do as a kid is I had to watch the news with him every day at 6 o'clock. So I understood a little bit, very little about racism. And I understood what Dr. King was doing. I understood the civil rights movement at 10, 11 years old. I understood, that there was inequality.
Okay.
Let me tell you this story if you don't mind. a 10-year-old, right? My daddy makes me watch the news with him. So I'm sitting here watching the news. And this is a 10-year-old's mind clicking, right? So I'm watching Dr. King lead a march somewhere in the South. I don't know where he is at this time, but he's leading a march. And I started thinking, wait a minute, every time I see the Pope, I would see thousands of people. Every time I see the president, I would see thousands of people. And every time I see Dr. King, I would see thousands of people. So my grandfather was a Baptist minister, and I knew that Dr. King was a Baptist minister. I knew the Pope was Catholic. So I knew that Dr. King could not be the Pope. So my 10-year-old, right? I turned to my father and I said, Daddy, do you think Dr. King will be president? Man, my daddy was my height, 6 feet tall, weighed about 280 pounds, right? He got up, man, and he put his shirt in his pants. He was mad as hell, put his shirt in his pants, and he looked and said, fool, is you crazy? There ain't never been no black president. There ain't never gonna be no black president, not in my lifetime or yours. And sat back down and puffed on his pipe, mad, man. He was just mad. He would always take the same posture when he's angry, cross his left leg over his right, put his pipe in his mouth and take a puff. But he was angry that day. Well, can you imagine in 2008, the presidential election? Well, that was 2008, right? Yeah, the presidential election in 2008. And when I saw that President Obama won, right now I have chill bumps on my arm. I don't know if you can see them. But did you see him? when President Obama won, I cried like a baby. And all I could think of was, Daddy, I wish you were here to see this. It happened in my lifetime. But now that was good. That was I thought a relevant story of back then when I was 10. But there was also an obvious difference in treatment in class. I was sort of like, I would say the teachers tolerated my presence, and that was about the extent of it. This is amazing. From 1966 until 1970, I was in this integrated setting. We still had a black school and a white school up until 1970, 1971, I believe. But anyway, during this time frame, from 1966 until 1970, I never made a grade above a C. Never got it, never made. I was on the border of failing. I never made above a C. And this miraculous thing happened when we integrated in 1971. And I don't know what happened. It's like I must have had some kind of miraculous academic growth spurt. But from 1971, after we integrated, and this is amazing, the same kids I was going to school with at Gordon, right? I'm all of a sudden smarter than them. I had like a 4.0 average for 10, 11, and 12th grade. I had a 2.0 average from 6th grade through 9th grade, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the white school. I can't explain it. So I write it off as, I want to be optimistic. I had an academic growth spurt.
Oh man! So with everything that you experienced, in your upbringing and at Gordon, if you had to use the 5 senses, is there a smell, a taste, a touch, or any sensation that resonate with you when you think about Gordon and your upbringing in Barnesville?
I would say the sound of the playground at 10:30 in the morning. We had recess at Gordon. The sound of the bell on Tuesdays every other Tuesday, we got out early. No, it was Wednesday. I think it was a Wednesday. Every other Wednesday, I can remember looking forward to that half day. And it was tied to a Barnesville tradition. Back in the old days when this is what I heard, but back when we were an agrarian society in Barnesville, people had to feed their families. So if you worked downtown or whatever, what they would do is Wednesday afternoon, they shut down town at noon, and people would go hunting and fishing to get food for their families. And then you would open up again and do a Saturday morning business, or Saturday morning or all day Saturday business. So our school would shut down on I believe it was Wednesday afternoon at 1:30. And I remember I remember looking forward to that bell ringing, because that was something that I was growing up with the kids. I was at Gordon, but I lived across the tracks, right? So I got something y'all don't have. I'm off of school at 1 o'clock on every other Wednesday. I think it was every other Wednesday, but I remember that the sound of the bell to go to the playground and to get out of school early. Those are two sounds that resonate with me. Smell wise, I remember what Gordon smelled like when I got there. The first time I went in the building, it was an old building, and I could smell, at the black school, we had concrete walls, right? It was just, we got the bare minimum, have you gone out to the Booker campus before?
No, I haven't been.
You should try to find it. It's just right. Where the old radio station is in Barnesville?
Yes, sir. If
you're traveling toward Forsyth, go past the old radio station, which will be to your left, and then it should be like the second road to the right. And it's all grown up, but you can go there and look at our Booker school. Wow. But that school was all concrete. So coming from an all concrete school, concrete has no smell, right? When I went to Gordon, it was an old, it was a brick school, but the interior was all wood, hardwood floors, old antiquated desk. The walls were wooden, paneled. So the smell was different. I recall that smell. So those are two things: sound and smell.
So like everything that was happening in Barnesville and at Gordon for school specifically, could you remember a peak moment at Gordon, something that you enjoyed doing, or something that happened that you actually liked?
Yeah, it goes. It's back to the playground again, and just observing. There were a number of games that I became exposed to that I knew nothing about. One was tabletop football, and what we would do is we take a piece of paper and you fold it down to it's about the width of a ruler, right? And then you fold it the way you fold the flag. You know how they fold the flag? And you tuck that, and now you have this little triangle, right? And you play from two ends of the desk. So you thump this piece of paper, and the objective is to get close to the edge without it falling off.
Wow.
Right? Now, so if it goes all the way to the edge and it overhangs the edge, stops and overhangs, that's a touchdown. You get 6 points. Then you bring the paper back and you stand it up on its end and you thump it. And the other person is holding a field goal like this, right? Look at my fingers. So if it goes between the field goals, you get an extra point. Now, if you thump the piece of paper to the point where it does not reach the edge, but if you can take the tip that's furthest away and spin it to where it overhangs the edge, 3 points. Wow. That's a field goal. So, and you play this game back and forth and you have a number that it goes to. So I thought that was pretty enlightening.
So this was a game that you got, you learned.
I learned that game. Another game we used to play is marbles golf. You play golf with you shoot marbles and you play golf. And there were like 4 holes, and one hole in the middle. So you score, you have to go around and you shoot until you miss a hole. But if you keep going, you get to shoot into the middle, you score, and then you just count. So those are a couple of things that I consider to highlight. The other thing that was a highlight for me at Gordon was the 7th grade class every year would do a trek up to Washington, D.C. And they start the preparation usually in the 6th grade, and they start teaching you things about what do you call it? Being polite around the table. I can't think of the name of it right now. What do we call that? Thank you, etiquette. And I remember the teacher reading us this book called about the Goofy. And the Goofy does this, and the Goofy does that, and the Goofy, all these are things the Goofy does that are not proper etiquette, So they taught us how to use a knife and a fork, how to eat without use a knife and a fork without using your elbows, You see it a lot, They taught us how to all the stuff about etiquette, what was the fork placement and the spoon placement, why they were like that, and we went through all this stuff in the 6th grade. So when we got to Washington, we would not look like the Goofy from the South, right? So, but long story short, that was in preparation. But to go on the trip, we raised money, and we started by, back in the old days, they used to have it's called Blue Horses. Blue Horse is like, are you familiar with a Blue Horse?
No, sir.
That's no, 3 or 4 generations ago. But anyway, the Blue Horse was like a redeemable value. If you buy something, a school supply item of value, it would have Blue Horses on it. And you cut the Blue Horses out. It was like people, this is another generation before you, called gold bond stamps. Did you hear your parents talk about gold bond stamps? Have you heard for real? Okay, so Blue Horses are to students like gold bond stamps were to adults. You buy something, they give you these stamps, you save these stamps into books, and when you get to a certain value, you can redeem them, right? Okay. So we would start in 6th grade, collecting all the Blue Horses. Everybody and all the kids in the class would make sure that their families bought Blue Horse products, and we save all these Blue Horses and we would redeem them. So we may redeem them for a bicycle, and then we raffled the bicycle, right? And then from the bicycle raffle, we buy something else that we can raffle. We sold donuts from Krispy Kreme. We did all kinds of stuff to raise money to subsidize our trip to Washington. So in the final analysis, so my 7th grade class was supposed to go to Washington, but there was this big thing in Washington. It was a big. This is 1967, right? So this is after Dr. King has been killed, and Washington had this makeshift city on the mall. People were living there and protesting about the treatment of African Americans in the United States. So long story short, my 7th grade class didn't go. Wow. But we kept hope alive, and we went in 8th grade. So, all right, so they gave us another year to raise more money, right? So so in 8th grade, we got to go. And now the cost of the trip, with all of the stuff that we have purchased and raffled and this and that, I now need $55 for my 1-week trip to Washington. That's the cost of the trip. Well, my mother and my father's combined salary was about that much per week. To give you another story that's related, I'll come back to this. I went 40 years with 2 teeth missing in the back because I had 2 cavities, and the cost to fill a cavity when I was a boy was about $35, right? And I had 2. The cost to remove a tooth was $7. Family decision. I now have implants. But now back to my trip, right? My family didn't have $55 for me to go on the trip. So I was a little sad about it. And I told my my teacher, there was a Mr. Tenney and Mr. Turner. I think Mr. Turner became Dr. Turner, and his family owns a liquor store right there at the railroad tracks. You know, is it called Turner Liquor? What is it?
I think it's still called, but I know some liquor store still there though.
Yeah. It does on the downtown side of the railroad track, just next to the track on the downtown side. Anyway, he owned that liquor store after he retired from academia. But anyway, they said, don't worry about it. Just ask your family if they can spare some money for you to buy a couple of souvenirs. So their benevolence somehow they came up with the $55, and I got to take the trip. So that was probably my highlight of benevolence in my experience at Gordon.
Man,
8th grade.
that's interesting. That is a lot happened between 7th and 8th grade.
But now let me tell you this: that same two guys, right? Those same two guys, they were our PE coaches, right? They taught math and science, but they also were our PE teachers. So I had asthma growing up, and asthma stunted my growth. So when I got to high school, I was about 4'11". I graduated, I was 5'10", so I grew a foot in high school. So I guess I grew out of asthma to where it had, it no longer stunted my growth. But long story short, I'm this, you talk about a 90-pound weakling. I wasn't even 90 pounds. I was something much less than that, when I was in the 8th grade. And so we were outside doing PE, and the two coaches, I guess they had decided they wanted to have some fun.